Today I'm going to talk about the mechanics of the guitar, how I hold it, how it's positioned, how my hands are positioned, and why I consider this the best and easiest way to play. I should point out first, I'm classically trained, which means I use the very similar techniques to what's used in classical guitar, which is why I have the guitar on my left knee and I have my foot on a footstool. When I'm standing up or playing, or if I didn't have a footstool, I'd have a guitar strap on to keep the guitar in this position. Let's start by talking about the left hand. I have the neck up with the headstock about at eye level. What this allows is for me to bend my elbow more. The more I bend my elbow, the less I have to bend my wrist. And playing like this is really uncomfortable. That's why I don't want the neck down here. I want it up here. One of the rules I try to keep to is don't make my body conform to where the guitar is, but rather put the guitar where it's most comfortable for my body. Another thing I'd like to point out, the other reason for having the angle on the neck is what I call the range of rotation of this wrist. Now, if I was to turn my wrist, it's pretty easy to put my palm down. I can put my palm up, but I can't really twist much further than that. If you've got your palm facing up when you're playing the guitar, it's pretty much at the end of the range of its rotation. So backing it off a little bit, less of a straight up and more of an angle, less strain on the forearm. Cellists, a cello is played like this, they have it really easy because this is a very comfortable, like right in the middle of the range of rotation for the wrist. Next, I'm going to tell you about my rules for the left hand. I have 3 rules that I've taught students for years. One is, and these are rules that were made to be broken. They're when possible, and sometimes you can't follow the rules, and sometimes you just don't want to, because breaking the rules is not always a bad thing. First rule is, when you skip a fret, skip a finger. If you've got 2 adjacent fingers, keep them in adjacent frets. When you skip up here, skipping a finger makes it easier rather than trying to stretch. One, like I said, you can break the rules, but one caveat I will mention is that you should never separate these 2, the second and third finger. That puts an undue strain on the tendons of the hand, and it could cause permanent damage. First rule, when you skip a fret, skip the finger. You can break the rule by stretching up this way, stretching down that way. Other than that, it's always easier to skip a fret and skip a finger. Second rule, never shift like this when you could just go to the next finger. Unless you want that as a slide for effect. As a rule, you want to never use the same finger twice in a row. This goes for when you're going across the strings too. One of the things that I've always taught is what I'd like to call infinite speed. No matter how fast you are, there's nothing faster than being in 2 places at once. And if I can have 2 fingers on 2 different notes, I'm already there. I'm already in 2 places at once. Will always be faster, easier, more efficient than going side to side with the same finger. When I play something, I'll make my fingering follow this rule. Say if I'm going here, I want to go back, I'll go to a different finger rather than jumping aside. Third rule, when you're shifting, like I said, you can use the same finger. but you don't want to shift twice in a row. Shifting is like using the same finger twice in a row. It's like using the same foot twice in a row, which is called a skip. You know, when you're skipping, that's what you're using. But you would never try and use the foot more than twice. That will make you likely stumble and fall on your face. If I had to go to 2 higher notes, better to do one shift, go to another finger. If I run out of fingers here, I don't want to keep shifting my pinky. I'll shift all the way up, and then I have more fingers to work off of. As far as holding the hand, all our lives, from when we're born, we learn to use our hands grasping. As a result, all the strong muscles are on this side, all the weak muscles are on this side. When your hand has tension, usually it's going to strike in the weaker muscles. The weaker muscles all being on the back. When fingers pull up, that's a sign of stress. That's a sign that you're not relaxed. Always good to shake your hands out a little bit, let them relax, start again. The weakest muscle of the back of the hand is naturally going to be the pinky. Well, I would imagine for most people, that's the finger that you put the less work into. So, one sure sign of stress is when the pinky starts pulling back like that. You want to try and avoid that. When I was younger, I used to get terrible stage fright. And what happens is when you're afraid, muscles start to tense up. So then the fingers don't work as well. You make more mistakes. You get more nervous. You tense up even more. And it becomes a vicious cycle. One of the 2 ways that I started to overcome this was, first of all, I got the guitar to where I would always have it in the same position whenever I played. I took all my guitar straps, all my guitars, and I made sure that they were the same length so that when I stood up, wherever I moved, the guitar would always be right there. This made me feel comfortable because every time I put on the guitar, it was where I was used to it being, and it felt comfortable and it made me feel at home. So even if I was nervous before a gig, as soon as I put the guitar on, it made me feel more relaxed. Second thing is when I would start practicing, in the morning I'd get my cup of coffee, I'd sit down, sip some coffee, I'd play really slowly. And I would focus on totally relaxing my body in between each note. And it acted as a sort of self-hypnosis. So that, again, I was training myself to be relaxed whenever I played the guitar. This gives you time, when you're playing, practicing this way, is to say, how do I feel about the tone? How about if I hit, with a different, here, let's get a pick. If I hit with a different finger, or if I try angling the pick different, or putting the pick in a different spot, how does that change the sound? You have lots of time to think about how things sound, work on some vibrato, think about what happens in between the notes. Is there a space? Or are you doing some scraping, sliding, which not always a bad thing. Makes the guitar sound more organic when you have some slide, I think. Then you could also practice long notes, short notes, muted notes, some what they call pinch harmonics. See how many sounds you could get out of the guitar. Okay, one other thing. The thumb, as I said, grasping, that's using all your strong muscles. When you're playing, what you want to do is pinch the strings. And to do that, you want to have your thumb basically behind the second and third fingers. Back here, pushing that way so that the fingers can push down against it, pinching against it. And you want it in the middle here because that gives you equal leverage on both sides of your hand. Now, the right hand. If you're using a pick, now finger picking, that's a whole more complicated thing we won't get into right now. But if you're using a pick, one of the things to keep in mind is when you first started, I got a pencil here, when you first started learning to write, you probably didn't write like this. You probably, and probably still do to this day, get right down on the tip of the pencil. I do anyway. The same thing you want to do with the pick is get that pick way in your hand to where only the tip is out. Gives you a lot more control. Also, it keeps my pick from digging deep into the strings, getting caught on there, because my hand will keep it from going in. What I do is form a loose fist, resting my hand here. I find that the first joint, the joint closest to the tip of the finger, is leaning right on the strings. So I put the tip of the pick right over that joint, pointing straight at the guitar. In other words, at a 90-degree angle from the line of my arm. Now, there's different people have different opinions on how to move the pick. Mine is, I like the movement to come from the elbow. And again, if you go back to think of when you were a toddler, when you first started writing and drawing, when you were really small, we're going to tap into that. Playing the guitar is a lot like scribbling. You know, if you can scribble with a pencil or a crayon like you did when you were 3 years old, you can put that movement to work with your down and up strokes on the pick. One more thing. When we talk about going back to before we can remember, same thing with speech. As a result, what you want to do is tap into the speech center of your brain that you've been training since before you remember, and use that to associate sounds and the movements of your body. That's why I'll be using a lot of numbers in other videos. But I want to point out that there are some universal rules as far as conventional guitar notation. You have the 6th string, bottom string on this side, 1st string, or the top string, on this side. Again, they're backwards from the way they look, but you're talking about how that sound. The sound's the lowest, so it's called the bottom string, even though it's on the top. This is called the 6th, and then 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st string being on top. These are usually notated with a number with a circle around it. The frets, counting up from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, usually they're denoted using Roman numerals to distinguish from the strings. And the fingers are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4 using plain Arabic numerals. That's all for now. Play around, try the things that I've talked about, and next time we'll be talking about the modes.